Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of OPE. I am Iowa Joe. Going to continue our off-season off-topic episodes with a subject that is kind of close to me. I've grown up in the culture and all that stuff, and I kind of wanted to bring this out to
You
people.
are, unfortunately, you are massively distorted, the audio.
How about how about now?
So let's try it again. I just turned my camera off.
Okay. How about now? Can you hear me fine? Everything?
It's still really broken up. Nope.
Probably
It was,
shut that up. How about now?
keep talking.
Is this all right?
That's better.
Better? No worries?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Let's try that one again. Take two. All right. Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of OPE. I am Iowa Joe. We are doing another installment of our off-season, off-topic episodes. We're going to be talking about a subject that I've grown up in the culture. There are a lot of misunderstandings with the culture that I'm
Nope.
hoping to dispel a little bit of. So I brought on a guest from a club that I am a part of, which is the Liberal Gun Club. Dana, thank you for joining me today. Does that work better?
That is much better.
Okay. All right. So take three.
Yes.
All right. Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of OPE. I am Iowa Joe. This week, we are continuing our off-season, off-topic installments with a subject about a group, culture, misunderstood culture, something that I've grown up with most of my life, uh, which is the gun culture. And I know a lot that's going to turn a lot of people off as soon as I say it because there are a lot of misunderstandings about it. So I brought on somebody from a gun club that I am a part of, the Liberal Gun Club, to help me try to dispel some of the things about the gun culture that really turn a lot of people off. Dana, I didn't catch your last name before I jumped on, but Dana, thank you for joining me this week.
Yeah, hi. I'm Dana. I live in Massachusetts. I'm a member of both the Socialist Rifle Association and the Liberal Gun Club.
And that's the first thing that dispels most rumors that all gun owners are conservative right wing people. So right there, Dana's part of two different groups. Sorry if I say anything out of line. Um, I know you use your they their.
Yeah, I use they them pronouns.
Yeah, so I'm not used to it. I'm an Iowa guy, growing up in the middle of a cornfield. I don't meet a lot of the other pronouns, so forgive me if I make a mistake on that one.
Okay.
Um, but that just goes to show that there's everybody in the gun culture. So, Dana, let's start out with how did you get into gun culture?
So I grew up in a very anti-gun household. My first exposure to firearms was in Boy Scouts. I'm trans, by the way.
Okay.
And so that was the first exposure to firearms, and that was kind of it. And then I got involved in sort of leftist politics, and um, with Trump won, so I started listening to a lot of like anarchist podcasts and socialist podcasts and things like that. And with Trump won, became kind of concerned and was feeling that Knowing how to use a firearm or a collection of firearms, being reasonably skilled in them might become a relevant skill in the not too distant future. Um, so I went ahead and got my license with no particular plans to acquire firearms, and then kind of fell down the rabbit hole.
Yeah,
And so,
that
I
happens.
was I was anti-gun for a very long time. Saying um, take all the guns away from everybody.
Yeah,
And in theory, that works. But then it's like, how do you enforce it? It's kind of like, unless you have some mechanism to magically remove all the guns simultaneously, someone's going to end up having the guns. Whether
yes,
it's the cops or the fascists or the socialists or someone, unless you can magically beam all the guns away simultaneously, someone is going to end up with the power.
right. Right, and see, I grew up on the other end of things where I grew up in a pro gun house, but we were also pro Democrat because
Mm-hmm.
uh, my dad, since he was 18 years old, has been in, or he just retired from union work last year. So most of your union workers are liberal Democrat leaning uh, uh, people,
Mm-hmm.
and but he also grew up in a household where you
Right.
hunted, and you shot guns and all that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
he grew up that way, and I first started shooting when I was like 3 or 4 years old. My dad's holding me. It's a vivid memory where my dad's
Oh.
holding my shoulders, and I'm holding onto the little pistol, and
Mm-hmm.
it was just a little 22, and I shot
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And then I got my first gun at 10 years old because it was my dad's first gun, so he gave it to me,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just a little single shot shotgun. But
Yeah. But it
I
was
grew up,
like that.
yeah. So that just it went from there that I grew up in it. But I and the reason why I kind of wanted to do this episode, and I kind of said it at the beginning, was there's a lot of misunderstandings with it. Because, like I said, a lot of people think, well, oh, you're a gun owner, so you must be, this hardcore right winger, fly this, fly that. That's not me. I've always told people that I'm heavily left leaning, but the thing that keeps me more center is gun ownership.
Well, if you go far enough left, you get your guns back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if you go far enough right, you become more of a you get more liberal views too. So
Yeah.
everything's a circle.
Yeah, it's
So
who was it? I think it was Karl Marx said, "Under no pretext should firearms and ammunition be surrendered."
and that makes complete sense because that's the big thing about Nazi Germany was that the first thing that Hitler
Hmm.
did was disarm the populace,
Yes,
and it made it easier for him to take control because he basically brainwashed a group, and they brainwashed their group, and so on, so down the line,
right,
and then they took everything away from them,
right.
so there was no way for them to protect themselves. So the biggest thing that one of the big misconceptions I always see is how easy it is to go in and buy a gun. That's the
It
big
is, yeah, yeah. At least in Massachusetts, it is not easy at all. I mean, first
right.
of all, first of all, in Massachusetts, you have to have your license,
Yes.
and that process is not inexpensive, and it is not quick.
Yes.
Um, it takes probably like minimum, probably takes 2 months from deciding to get your license to having it in your hand, because you have to take a class that is on the order of 5 hours, and that
Okay.
that class is rules and regulations. Let's start off kind of like how a gun works, but then
Yeah.
there's a lot of time spent about like safe storage and safe handling of firearms, and the rules and regulations around the use of deadly force, um, and sort of strategies to minimize the likelihood that you'd have to use deadly force. And then what happens if you do end up having to use deadly force, kind of how you should handle the aftermath, and the fact that even if you were in the right from a criminal standpoint, you're still gonna go to jail. You're still
Yeah.
gonna get sued, and you still have to defend yourself in criminal court, and then you're almost certainly going to have to defend yourself in civil court.
Right.
So there's a lot of time spent on that. Then once you get your license, then you can go to a gun dealer and acquire a firearm. But then you have to have your national background check done and things like that.
Right.
So it's not. If you have a license, in theory, you can walk into a gun dealer and buy a gun. Um, but there's a few enough people licensed in Massachusetts that you don't just like. As far as I know, none of the people I know have just walked in and bought a gun. Also because guns are expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the truth. It's a very expensive hobby. Now here in Iowa, it is closer to what a lot of people think, where you can just go in buy. But there are still a lot of restrictions on it. So we have to have a license, kind of. It's not required to have be able to purchase a gun with a license anymore, but you have to go in, you have to fill out the paperwork. They have to run your everything. They basically have
Mhm.
to run your background, or they don't run the background check, but they send it to
To the
Nix
FBI. Yeah.
that does the background check,
Hmm.
and that can take anywhere from an hour to
Oh
three
wow.
days.
Okay. Yeah,
So
Here in Massachusetts, every time I purchased a firearm, that background check has been 15 minutes
yeah,
tops.
um,
So.
so no, I know a guy that owned a gun shop for the longest time, and I would sit down there with him, and it would just depend on A, time of day,
Hmm.
and B, how many they're doing at that time. But
Right.
it could take up to an hour or up to 3 days. And then after 3 days, some other situation, like if it doesn't come back in 3 days, then they deem it okay for you to buy the gun or whatever. Um, but now if you have your license,
Hmm.
which our license can be combined into a purchase and a carry permit.
Okay.
Uh, so if you have that, it's a lot quicker. All they got, because that is your background check.
Right. Okay. Yeah,
So
here in Massachusetts, you either have a what's called a firearms ID card, which allows essentially hunting,
yeah,
long guns, and sort of the traditional bolt action and break action shotgun kind of hunting guns, or you can have a license to carry, which is an unrestricted. You can have pistols and semi-automatic firearms, and that's a concealed carry permit.
yeah. Now here they did pass a law that we are a quote unquote constitutional carry state, so
Hmm.
you don't have to have a carry permit. But in order to be able to purchase something, you still have to run through all the background checks and
Right.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I keep my carry permit up, one, because I do travel to Wisconsin pretty often,
Yeah.
and
Do you have
uh,
reciprocal?
yes, yes.
Okay.
So that's why I keep my and what Dana means by reciprocal is Wisconsin will uh, uh, accept the standards and the license that I have with Iowa to allow me to carry and have my gun with me when I'm in
Yeah.
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So
Massachusetts doesn't recognize anybody, and no one recognizes Massachusetts. So.
Illinois is the same way. So I try to always to avoid Illinois,
Hmm.
which sucks because I'm in an area where Not to like s- uh, pinpoint my location too much for a lot of people, but I'm in an area where I'm an hour north, or not even an hour. I'm probably like 20 minutes to 30 minutes north of the Missouri border, and then I'm like an hour from the Illinois border, and then it's like 3 hours to the Wisconsin border.
Okay.
So it would be nothing for me to jump over
Yeah.
to Illinois at any time or
Yep.
Missouri at any time.
Just don't go to
And
Chicago.
yeah, well, yeah, that's the truth. Well, being a Packer person, it's
Oh
not
yeah.
advice for me to go to Chicago anyway.
Yes.
Um, so, but anyway, back to what I was talking about. I always try to keep my carry permit up. That way I can go anywhere. And it's a lot easier to go in and purchase a firearm because of that. I can just
Mhm.
hand them my license, my permit, and we can do the paperwork. And that's basically my background check because when you get your permit, you have to run both county, state, and federal backgrounds on it.
Okay.
So that's what I do, and that's why I always try to keep mine up to date and everything.
Hmm.
Not that I'm, going out every other weekend
Yeah.
knocking off banks or anything like that, but I wish I wouldn't be as broken living in Iowa as I am now, but
No, instead you'd be living in Fort Leavenworth.
yeah. uh, so another thing that a lot of people like to misconstrue is throwing out ideas saying this would be just so easy to enact this law to restrict this but allow you to keep your rights. And like you kind of mentioned earlier about just going out and taking all the guns away and all that stuff. What people don't understand is trying to do that is almost impossible. So one of the things that I hear often is, well, no more private sales. S-
Okay. Yeah, I mean
Uh,
that I don't I have less of a problem with I mean that's the gun show loophole.
yeah,
Um and I have less of a problem with that because there's no background check that
right.
happens with the private sales. So demanding that all say so. I mean, the way you get around that though is you say, okay, all transactions. So the background check, the instant background check system, is restricted to federal firearms licensees.
Right.
And so if you enable, you know, random person who wants to do a firearms transaction to have access to that in some fashion so that they can run a background, a criminal background check on someone before they do the transaction. That solves a lot of the um, concern, I guess, around the private sales. But I mean, honestly, um, I don't really have a problem with saying, all firearms transactions must go through a licensed person.
And in theory, I don't either, but in practice, I think that
Yes.
would be the hardest thing because, like, let's just say hypothetical. Uh, well, we'll just go with my best friend. My best friend lives in Wisconsin, and we're both gun owners, and
Hmm.
we loved and all that stuff. If he wanted to buy a gun from me, I would have to go to an FFL,
Right. You'd have to do because it's across state lines.
right? And then I would have to have it shipped to an FFL up there, and then we would have to go through all that issue. Right now, based on law, I can sell it to him, give it to him. He can drive up there and then have his FFL do the paperwork on it.
Hmm.
Nobody knows. I mean, or how should I break this down? If that happens, nobody knows whether that was a private sale, that was
Oh,
a
so got it. So it just shows up in Wisconsin under your friend's control.
right. So it doesn't. So nobody knows how that was done. It was just it shows up. He has it. He transfers it to his name.
Right.
So the thing that I always say is it's so hard to keep track of who's doing a private sale, who's doing all this stuff.
Hmm.
And one of the things that you brought up with giving people that want to do a private sale access to the nicks, that goes into the whole invasion of privacy thing. Because then what's stopping somebody from just using that system to, okay, well, they're going to purchase this gun,
Right. I
I'm
mean,
going
this.
to
Yeah.
I'm
I'm
going
gonna
to tell
pretend
them
that.
they're purchase this gun, but I'm just
Yeah.
using this to run a background check.
Right. Yeah. I don't. That's a good point, and I don't. Off the top of my head, I don't have a solution for that.
Right, and that's why I always say that it's so nice to say these things and
Hmm.
hope that they go into inaction, but when you get down to brass tacks and trying to figure out how to enact it, it's almost
Right.
impossible for them, or maybe not impossible. But it's implausible.
Right. And then also the thing that goes along with having access to the mix is like the background check is based off of your social,
Yeah,
and like you have all of the whole identity information that goes in, and then so it's kind of like random person could steal your identity.
yeah, yeah. So that's why I say it's always nice to talk about how easy it would be to make private sales illegal, but how are you going to stop it?
Right. Yeah.
Um, Another thing is, I had a bunch of them on the top of my head, but then we had technical difficulties
Hmm.
earlier, and now they're all just kind of flew out there. But another one is one Iowa did that it kind of bugs me a little bit is they're making the gun stores run the background checks. Or it's the constitutional carry. Now you don't have to have a permit to go in and buy anything. You can just walk into the gun store
Hmm.
and then that forces the gun store to run the background check. I
Okay.
don't like that because that puts more, again, that opens up to, like I just said, like identity theft and people just running background checks for the hell of it and stuff like that. But then it also puts more pressure onto that gun store, gun shop owner, because let's say you've got five people in your store
Hmm.
wanting to buy guns. Well, now that just maybe guy person 3 and 4 don't want to sit around and wait for you to run background check on person 1 and 2.
Yeah,
Well, if
but I mean
it,
that's the so to me that's no different than going to a small boutique shop that has a limited staff,
right,
and you kind of have to wait your turn to get to talk to one of the salespeople.
but now think of that interaction with that small boutique or store and double that time because that person now has to run a background check on
Yeah,
what
but
you're purchasing.
I mean, to me, it's kind of no different than like say buying a car. Because they're going to be like, oh, let me run your license and make sure and your insurance, and then they're going to be like, oh yeah, and here's all the offers of the financing, and they're going to try to push you to do the financing and whatever, and it's kind of part of the process,
Right, but I
like buying
think
a car,
that's
and you
I
always
think
define all that stuff, but.
yeah, and I think a lot of it is just because there's so many small time gun shops, and I
Hmm.
think it's meant to hurt the small time gun shops than it is the bigger department store like shops. And I would rather have the small town gun shop because like the guy that I knew, he
I don't think it's deliberate. I think it's an artifact of the way the system was created.
yeah, but I think in a way that, and I could be wrong because I don't play a lot of politics, but I think it's a way that some of these lobbyists go in there and say, "Well, we just want the business to come to us. That way we can make them more money." And and I think
I
it's a
mean,
way to
do you really think that there is there a large gun store that is like big enough to have the level of traffic to
Bass
have
Pro.
to have a lobbyist like that. Is there a Walmart of firearms that has enough traffic that
Yeah.
I mean there's obviously the industry lobbyists and whatever. Um,
Well, like I said, Bass Pro slash Cabela's is probably big enough that they could say that, well, we just, if we can do this, you
mhm,
know, that'll draw more traffic into our stores. Um, I would say Shields is probably getting there with a lot of the stuff that they do because they do a lot of the same things that like
mhm.
a gun small shop would or guns small gun store would do. They
Okay.
would,
Yeah, I'm not
they're
familiar with Shields. I know
it's
Bass Pro, and I know the other one, Cabela's.
Cabela's.
Yes.
Shields is more of the Midwestern one, but
Okay.
it's starting to branch out a little bit further, I think
Okay.
out west. Uh, but they're kind of doing a lot of things that a lot of these small shops do where you can go in and you can trade your guns, you can sell your guns, you can do all that stuff. So they're trying to get in, or they're trying to
Hmm.
do a lot of the business that a
Okay.
lot of these small town shops do. So I could see them saying, we want to flow that traffic to us that we're losing by these smaller shops.
Hmm.
So maybe not have a lobbyist specifically saying, "Hey, let's screw over these small town shops," but I could see them saying, "Hey, we want to get more traffic into us. So if this law goes into effect, it's going to help us more than it is going to help
Yeah,
them."
that's fair.
Uh, so and my big thing is I love a small town shop because like the guy that I knew, it was in a town of less than maybe 500 people
Hmm.
and they didn't even have like a Dollar General. It was just they had a small little mom and pa gas station. They had a post office, and then he had his shop there because he lives in that area.
Hmm.
And he would bend over backwards for a lot of people. He took in a lot of trades. He took in a lot of consignments. Uh, how I got into him was I had uh, a Glock Model 30 45 ACP that
Okay.
I just was not happy with at all. It I didn't like it. It was blocky. I basically I'm not a Glock fan because
Yeah.
of it.
I prefer SIGs.
Me too. I'm a big SIG person, and this is one of the reasons why. I took it to another shop, and the guy was only offering me like $200 on the gun. I was like, no, I paid $500 for it. I'm
Yeah.
not going to take. So I took it down to him because I had heard about him and took it in there, and he goes, "Well, what are you looking to do?" I said, "If we can come up with a trade, let's trade it." He said, "All right. Well, what are you looking for?" And I looked at it. He had a small display case, and
Hmm.
he had a SIG SP 2022 and 40 cal set in there. I said, "Would you consider this?" He looked it up in his book and the gun. He goes, "You give me $40 and we'll call it good."
Yeah. Yeah, and you're not going to get that at a big a big box store of guns.
Right. So, and that got me hooked, and I went to this guy ever since, and I got him in my phone, and he's
Hmm.
kind of got out of the storefront, but he still has his FFL that he said that if you
Yeah.
find something, just let me know, and we'll get it sent to me, and
Hmm.
we'll get it taken care of. So, and that's why I like these small town shops a little bit more because, like you said, you're not going to get that kind of service at a big box store or at some of these bigger shops because they have to make money.
Right.
He wasn't in it to make a lot of money. He was in it as a hobby to help, to
Right.
he was going to make some money, but it was more to help people get what they're wanting.
Right.
And I bought a lot through him.
Yep.
And
Yeah. And
so,
the FFL I've spent most of my time with. He's in the business to make enough money to cover basically the rent on his shop,
yep,
and so that he has his license to have all the fun toys.
yep, pretty much. And that's kind of what this guy did is he owned the shop outright. He owned, all this stuff outright. So he just ran it out of the shop and he would have collections there, and a lot of times I felt sorry for him more towards the end of it because he was getting a lot more consignments than he was selling.
Yeah, and then that
So
gets
yeah,
problematic.
but yeah, I did a lot of business with him, and I've done a lot of collecting through him, and I would. And there were times that he'd say, "All right, well, you don't have to give me all the money now. Just give me this much a week, and we'll call it good."
Oh wow, that's yeah.
So
that
yeah,
that never thought about being able to do firearms on layaway.
yeah, and that was really good. And so, or there would be times that if I had something that I wasn't happy with, I could just go down there and say, "All right, well, what do you want for it?" And we
Hmm.
would come up with a trade, and he'd say, "All right, well, this will go in in my display case, and when I get the one that you're wanting in, it's yours."
Just do a swap, yeah.
So, and that's what I like about it. And to kind of get back to the topic with it, we have polarizing political ideals.
Hmm.
He's more the right wing side of it, and I'm more the left wing side of things. So, but we were able to come together and have communication, and it wasn't. It's not all bitter,
That's good. Yeah,
and
because
and
a lot of times when I've gone into to unless I have a recommendation from someone who I know, I'm always very apprehensive about
right.
going into a gun store.
And I imagine with you, it's a little bit rougher
Yeah,
than
yeah.
it is with me.
But
Uh,
honestly, in my experience, I've walked into some of these places and been like, yeah, my Glock is behaving this way. Like, what's going on? And they're like, we'll
yeah.
take a look at it.
And that's the one thing that I miss is we don't have a lot of gunsmiths in my area, which is weird because we got a lot of, metal shops and stuff like
Hmm.
that. And I that's what I kind of liked about this guy in his shop, that he wasn't a gunsmith per se, but he knew enough about it that he could say, okay, well, let's try this, and then if he
Yeah,
just didn't know, he didn't know.
yeah, yeah.
And
There's one gunsmith here in Massachusetts that like everybody recommends. Um, but he's far away.
and that's the problem I have is I'm far enough away from these bigger areas that it's hard for me to get to. Like Des Moines is about an hour and a
Mhm.
half, hour 45 minute
Yeah,
drive, and
yeah. That's about what it is for me to. I had to take my one of my rifles. Then I had to go all the way south, basically to Rhode Island, um, to take it to someone.
yeah, and so it's just one of those things that is sometimes it goes through your mind, is it worth it?
Hmm.
But so another aspect of things that I now this is one that when somebody asks me what I would do to instill new gun legislation, I tell them I wouldn't so much put more legislation in. I would attack gun problems from a different area, and that's I would put more money into mental health.
Yes, yeah. I mean the all of the at least here in Massachusetts, like all of the legislation around firearms control is all about sort of limiting access to firearms with specific features.
Right.
And it's not doing anything to address the causes of why do people want the firearms in the first place?
Right. And that's why I say, let's take the stigma out of mental health.
Yeah.
Here in Iowa, it's really bad because you got the farmer and the big bad farmer, and
Hmm.
you know, I'm a man, I can't cry, and
Yeah.
I'm this and I can't do this, or if you get hurt, just rub some dirt on it and stuff like that.
Right.
Let's take the stigma out of mental health because when you look at a lot of the issues with these school shooters or the guys going into like the Aurora shooting where
Yes.
those types of shootings, what's the big common denominator for it? they went through something tragic or they went through something that
Mm-hmm.
destroyed their mental health. They had nowhere to go with it, and this was their way of handling it.
Right.
And if we can get people to stop stigmatizing mental health and
Mm-hmm.
putting stuff out there for, instead of trying to take that away, put more into it, I think that would handle a lot of things.
Right. Yeah.
Because that would give people these outlets, and that would allow these mental health uh, 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 doctors and counselors and stuff like that to target some of these, and not so much target, but
Mm-hmm.
okay, they always talk about red flag laws.
Right.
Well, if I've got a guy that comes in and he's talking constantly about, oh man, that would feel so good to kill this person, or that's an instant red flag. And then that's how you can say, okay, maybe we need to keep an eye on this guy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's also the it's for that. It's like, well, why do you want to harm this particular individual?
Right.
Well, it's because they were I was bullied in high school or whatever, and this person is bullying me, and I have trauma that is leading me to consider violence, and yeah, so addressing those kinds of things. There's also the economic aspect of this, that people who feel secure and happy and are not economically precarious tend not to do violence.
Yeah. Not violence on anybody outside their circle. I mean, some of the people that have money are tend to be the ones that are like domestic abusers and stuff like that, but they're not the ones to go out into a school and take it out on anybody else.
Right.
Not saying
Well,
that domestic violence is right.
yeah,
Let me go
yeah.
back.
Well, I
I'm
mean,
not condoning it.
yeah. I mean, I think that the largest firearms related homicides are suicide and domestic partner stuff.
Yeah, usually suicide is about 60% of yearly homicide or yearly gun deaths.
Firearms deaths.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And so, but a lot of that is, the well, why do you want to shoot your partner? Well, because you feel, uh, you know,
inadequate.
you feel inadequate, you feel insecure, you feel like your partner is going to go see someone else because you can't provide for them.
Yeah,
And so that's where that economic activity comes in. Um, so it's the if you feel like you have a decent job and you're able to cover your expenses and your living situation is stable and you're not living someplace where you're constantly subjected to environmental degradation, um, then you're less likely to think of violence as a solution. I mean, the reason I've gotten into guns is because I'm scared.
yeah, yeah,
So it's someone who came from a liberal household. No, firearms are bad. No one should have guns. To yeah, we should have guns. It's because I'm scared.
right. And going through Reddit or even going through like the gun club's online forum and even their uh Discord, you'll see that occasionally where, hey, I'm new here. I'm thinking about getting a gun because, I'm worried about the current state of things, or I've got a, or like in your case, I'm trans. I'm worried that something's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen, or, I'm part of the other, LGBTQ plus
Community.
group,
Yeah.
and or currently ICE.
Yes.
I'm a immigrant into this country. I'm a legal immigrant into this country, but I'm afraid somebody's going to grab me.
Yeah. Or someone's going to grab me, or someone's going to grab my family.
So and to your point, that's not good for our situation because Now that puts more stigma onto guns because now people are shooting at each other just
Mm-hmm.
because they're scared.
Right.
And to another thing, talking about the percentage of deaths and stuff like that, uh people don't realize that gun deaths don't make up that much of
No,
yearly death
no,
totals.
no.
I'm not
Like
up to
auto
date
accidents.
on, yeah, I'm not up to date on the numbers, but I think a couple years ago it was only that, well, maybe it was pre-COVID. I keep forgetting that COVID was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, but at that time, gun deaths in the United States was only like 38,000.
Right.
Now I
And
say only, but 38,000 is still a lot of people. But when compared to how many people are in the United States,
right. And we're spending all of this time and energy to go after firearms to try to limit firearms deaths. Great, sure, that makes sense. But how much proportionally, how much are we spending to address deaths from economic poverty or environmental injustice or food deserts?
yeah. Or let's get into the other things: motor vehicle deaths, drug deaths, illegal drug deaths.
Yeah.
Um,
How
you
many
know,
people did we lose to the opioid epidemic?
yeah, and that's the thing. And then when you break that number down even further, going back to the original point, when 60% of the 38,000 is due to self-harm or domestic
Mm-hmm.
violence, then you got to wonder, okay, well, why aren't we doing more for mental health? Or
Right.
why aren't we doing more to prevent this? Or why aren't we doing
Yeah. If we
more?
if we if we get if we get ahead of the problem by emphasizing mental health and all of the other factors, then we drive that. That is a significantly more effective way to address firearm deaths
Right.
than simply saying, "Oh no, these people can't have guns."
Exactly. Or we limit this or we limit that. Well, you're not. The thing that I always go back to that always makes anti-gunners mad is no matter what we do to limit legal gun ownership, the people that are going to get guns aren't going to worry about those limits.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that are you worried about getting guns, the criminals, the drug dealers, the stuff like that, aren't going to worry about limits. They're not going to worry about mag capacity. They're not
Right.
going to worry about this. They're not going to worry about, well, is this on the
You can
list
just
of,
go across state lines and buy it.
or you don't even have to do that. You just look for the guy down the street and you say, hey, can I buy this off you? And pop out a wad of cash.
Yeah.
And that's where I say, even though in theory it's nice to say we're going to make private sales illegal, in practice, how do you stop that guy from walking down and say, well, that gun's only worth $500 if I go in the store. Well, here's $1,000 if you give it to me and don't ask any questions.
Right.
So, how do you stop that? But criminals aren't going to worry about what these laws are. So if you're worried about stopping criminals, let's look at the group that are supposed to be stopping criminals more than the group that are you're worried are going to quote unquote
Mm-hmm.
become criminals, and that's law enforcement.
Yes, and what percentage of those domestic uh, and self-inflicted gunshots are law enforcement?
Right. And or how many of those deaths from domestic violence or something like that could be prevented because law enforcement actually did their job.
Yeah,
you
well,
know
I
I
am not in favor of the existence of cops, so
Right. And I've become over the years so cynical when it comes to law enforcement that
yeah,
I think part of it is because I listen to a lot of true crime
yes,
podcasts. And when you sit there and listen, like I was listening to a story the other day that, um,
cops don't prevent crime.
right, and they don't have the duty to protect you.
Nope.
The Supreme Court's told them that.
Yep.
But I was listening to a story the other day about a missing indigenous girl 15 years old, and she something about she told her mom that she was going to go to the movies with some friends. The mom went out to do something. When she came back, there's a party going on. Some of these teenagers are the girl called the mom saying something, so the mom rushed home. She was in the girl was in the bedroom, but these teenagers weren't letting the mom in to go into the bedroom.
Oof.
The mom called the cops, went outside, called the cops. When she
Cops
came
got
back
her.
in, no, no, the when they came back, or when she went back in the house, everybody ran, and the girl and her daughter ran, and the cops claimed it was just a runaway.
Oh, yeah.
And they wouldn't do anything for her. And this
Hmm.
girl's still missing to this day.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
or
No
you hear
argument.
about
No
the
argument for
ones.
me.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No argument for me about the missing indigenous folks, and the cops do absolutely nothing.
Or another example is when you hear about, um, well, this wife was being abused all the time, and finally she stood up and said no, and was filed for divorce and got a
Restraining order.
restraining order, but the cops wouldn't enforce the
Yep.
restraining order.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, next thing you know, she's dead.
Yeah.
So let's not worry about people getting the gun so much as let's start worrying about the protection of people. Let's start enforcing the laws that are on the book more than trying to come up with more laws that you're not going to enforce.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the firearms rulemaking is political posturing,
It is very much so.
and like the stuff that, at least here in Massachusetts, the rulemaking does not significantly impact the lethality of the firearms. You know, we
Right.
have we have magazine limits. We now have bans on semi-automatic rifles.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and we have say, oh, you cannot. It's a combination of semi-automatic, a pistol grip, and a collapsible stock.
Because those make
There's
those
some collection. I forget all the combinations of features that you're not allowed to have. It basically
right.
boils down to you're not allowed to have an AR, a
Right.
modern AR.
And what a
Um,
lot of people don't realize is the AR is not that much of a dangerous gun.
well, I mean,
It is, but it isn't.
yeah,
If you
right,
look at the round, it's just a more powerful 22 round.
right. But it's the um, most homicides are performed with handguns,
Yep.
and having 10 rounds versus 15 rounds versus 17 rounds is not going to effectively change the lethality of the gun.
Right.
It's you may put 2 rounds into the person, you may put 20 rounds into the person. They're
Yep.
just as dead.
Or if my goal was only to go in and shoot two people and I shot those two people, what good was that 10 round capacity? You
Right,
know, whether I had a 10 round mag or I had a 20 round mag, I still went in and got what I was going to do done.
right. So it's it looks good on paper, but for the people that are going to do a violence,
Aren't
it,
going to worry about what's on that paper.
they're not going to worry about what's on that paper, and the impact is minimal.
Right. Um so let's stop with the doomsaying and let's
Okay.
talk about what's fun with firearms. You know, people always
Oh
ask
yeah,
me,
it's it's
"Why
it
do you
is
like firearms?"
because it is a skill.
Yep.
It's hard. It is hard to use a firearm well.
Yes.
Um, I have spent thousands and thousands of dollars on getting training.
Yeah, I feel you.
I have gone through the entire rifle and pistol sequence at 6 Hour Academy.
Oh, really?
Yes, That's handgun 101 through 104, rifle 101 through 104, um, some defensive carbine stuff where we're operating in and around vehicles,
Right.
long range or medium range carbine. Um, so, and I don't consider myself particularly skilled with firearm. So it's still a challenge. But to be able to put a piece of paper out at 100 yards and then you know put all of the bullets in a 1 inch box.
Yep.
It's a rush. It's
It
it's
is.
look what I have done. I've spent a lot of time um, building this skill.
I always
Um,
say the smell of burning gunpowder is like my drug of choice.
eh, um, also, it is the it's very mentally focusing.
Yes.
It's I hate to call it Zen, but it's if you're not paying attention to everything you're doing, you're gonna mess your shot up.
And not just that, if you don't practice proper protocol, there's no fixing some of the mistakes that can happen with that
Yeah,
firearm.
yeah. So
So, you
I
have to
have
be
had
hyper focused.
yeah I've had one ND,
Yeah.
um, and fortunately because I was continuing to have the firearm pointed down range, it went off in a reasonably safe direction, scared the fuck out of me.
I
Um,
imagine.
and I'm like, okay, I'm done for the day.
Yeah, I've only had one ND in my life too, and my dad had a uh Ruger single six, which is
Mhm.
a 22 caliber 6 shot revolver, and it had a
Okay.
9.5 inch barrel on it.
Yeah.
Well, it was him and my uncle's favorite road hunting gun. They would just drive down the road with it. They'd have it set in the middle between them, and then whichever.
Eee.
Yeah,
That
I
makes me
know
super nervous.
it's not the most legal thing in the world, but like I said, Iowa in the 70s and 80s.
I'm
What are
just
you gonna
worried
do
about it
about
going off.
it? Well, hammer fired, so
Okay. If
it's a
it's hammered
revolver.
down, yeah. If it's
Yeah,
hammered down, then
yeah. Um, but anyway, Dad had it for years, and my uncle always borrowed it once in a while because they both loved the gun. Well, they got it back, and we had it in the house, and I had it in my because I built a gun cabinet when I was in high school, so
hmm
we had it in my room, and I picked it up because I was gonna clean it, and you know how you always do when you first pick up a gun, you're supposed to look and check it,
yes.
and I didn't.
Oh
Fif-
no.
I was 15 at the time, and
Yeah.
I aimed it across the room in my room. No one was near me. Nobody was anything like that. But there was a cup on the end of my bed, and I aimed it at the cup. Next thing I know, that cup wasn't there anymore. So, yeah, I had an ND. It was still one of the best shots I ever made, being it was
Yeah.
an ND. But of course, dad and mom were both mad, and I was kind of, freaking out a little bit because I was like,
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that. Well, my uncle returned it loaded,
Yeah.
and we didn't know about it, and I didn't follow, one of the
You didn't
four
follow proper
steps.
procedure.
Yeah. So, but I'm hyper vigilant on all of those things anymore. And
Yeah.
even when I go down to a gun shop, if somebody's down there and we're looking at a gun, the first thing I do is always check it. Oh
Yep.
well, I did that. No, I've heard that before and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
so one of the first things that they teach you when you go through some of these classes and that, always check your firearm.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yeah. And it's what they teach you at SIG is you make sure the firearm is clear, and then you look away and you do it again.
yep. Oh, I'll sit there and I'll rack it 100 different times just to make sure that you
Yeah.
know everything's out of it and everything's good.
Yeah.
or
So
the revolver, I'll pop it open and spin the cylinder a couple of times just to make sure I'm not seeing
hmm
any,
yeah, yeah, but
um,
it's you've got the paper at 100 yards, you've got the steel at 200 yards, to or to you have a 22 pistol.
yeah,
I've shot a Ruger, what is it, Mark 7?
oh
They're
yeah, 2245, yeah,
they're standard. There's the standard Ruger, um, and hit steel at 100 yards
yep.
with a 22 pistol, and just being like, damn, this
And see, I never
little
went
tiny
through,
bullet, little tiny
yeah,
bullet.
yeah,
You have to aim, like off the target, but then to
yep.
be able to consistently make the steel go ping is an accomplishment.
It is, and you've got to know wind direction and
Yeah,
uh, what's the curve of the earth and
yeah, the
all
ballistic.
that other stuff. But see, I never actually went through any like course training. All
Okay,
my training came out of the backwoods.
yeah,
It would be nothing for dad to go to the store, buy a box of 22s and say, "Come on, we're going
hmm
to your uncle's and go shooting."
yeah,
And we just go down and out in the woods and clear out the box or two
hmm
boxes or whatever. And but I have to admit I had some good trainers. My dad
yeah,
was always a good shot because with him he was taught if you didn't hit your target you weren't going to eat.
hmm
And because like I always tell people, my dad's parents were kind of up in age when they had my dad. So
okay,
my grandma was 38, my grandpa was 49 when they had my dad. So my grandpa was born, both of them were born pre-depression.
got it.
So they grew up in the depression where if you didn't hit your
hmm
target, you didn't eat.
Right.
So that's what they passed on down to their
Yeah,
kids was you.
my wife's grandfather hunted
Yeah.
for the table,
Yeah.
and I am now going to do my hunter's education thing, even though I'm mostly vegetarian, um, so I can go hunt with friends, just to have that experience.
Yeah, and see I have a hard time with it because I just once I see that deer or the rabbit or the squirrel, it's like I don't want to shoot it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's like I want to have I mean, hunting is part of our DNA
Yeah.
as humans. I mean, we first we hunted with sticks, and then we hunted with faster sticks, and now we're hunting with very fast rocks.
Yeah.
Um, but the process of going into the woods and tracking game and being like, I could shoot you, I could kill you, but I am choosing not to because I don't feel the need.
Right.
uh, that is an experience that I kind of feel like is a connection to it's a connection to the outdoors. It's also a connection to our ancestral past. Um, and so, also it's just fun to be out in the woods.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of times anymore, I'll just take because, like I said, I'm in a small town in Iowa, so we got woods all over the place.
Yeah.
So I'll take my pup dog up to the woods and just let her run, and I'll just sit there and listen to everything.
hmm
Hear the squirrel yelling at the dog, or
Yeah.
you'll hear a couple deer running off or whatever, and
Yeah. I mean, I'm a trail runner, and I do a lot of search and rescue work and stuff like that. So I'm spending a lot of time out in the woods, but it's all sort of more active
yeah,
woods. It's not so immersive.
right. So like I was saying with my training, it was all backwoods stuff, and the one story, and this is why I think I got into guns a lot more, was because I always strive to try doing this. My dad and my uncle always said that their dad, my grandpa, I never got to meet him. He died a year
hmm
before I was born. So, um, could take the 22 rifle that we have now, which is a Springfield bolt action 22.
Okay.
It's basically based off the 1903 Springfield.
Got it. Yep.
He could take that. They would put a stick match into the fence post. They
Oh,
would go distant back, and he
mhm.
could light that match every single time. And so
I find
that
that hard to believe, but
I've got
it's
two
a great
witnesses on
story.
it. I
Yeah,
have two witnesses on it, so I've got to go off of that.
I
And
find it hard to believe that you could light the match without destroying it.
they said that's how good he was. And then another story that I heard, and this was not even from um direct family. This was from just like this would be my grandpa's uncle or my grandpa's nephews. I don't know why I was
Mhm.
saying uncles, nephews that uh when they went out, he was told that when they went out to do their rifle training for the military, because my grandpa was in the United States Army Air Corps
Mhm.
during World War II. So they had to go out and do their qualifications.
Yep.
Him and another buddy were damn good at shooting. Well, they had the one friend that couldn't shoot to save to save his life.
Mhm.
So what they did was the one friend laid on one side, the other friend laid on, or my grandpa laid on the other
Yeah.
side, and the one friend that couldn't shoot sat in the middle, and they were taking his
His
exam
shots.
for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but and then my dad said even after Grandpa's stroke that he could still go out and sit on the porch, and Grandma hated it, but they would have the clothespins on the line, and he was nailing all the
Oh,
clothespins.
nice, nice.
So, but like I said, he grew up in a time that if you didn't hit your target,
Right,
you
you didn't
didn't
eat.
eat. So he had to get good at things,
Right.
and so I hearing all those stories, it always strived for me to go out and try to do stuff like that. Like I've gotten good enough where I've been able to hit the clothespin, I've been able to hit a match. I've been able to hit a pin, a writing pin, but I've never been able to strike the match. And I know that's
Okay.
possible because I've seen guys doing the like what's the fast draw guy Mitsapitalik.
Oh, yes.
I've seen him do it, and he may not be able to do it every time, but I've seen him do it. I believe
Hmm.
I've seen videos of him. So I've never been able to do that, but I've been able to do some of the other stuff. So that was always my strive to do
Yeah.
was I'm going to go out, I'm going to try this because I know he could do it, and I'm going to use the same damn rifle that he used,
Hmm.
and we're just going to do this. Um, but that's how me and my dad would do
Yeah,
stuff on weekends.
I could see how you would. It can be a bonding experience.
And so it's just one of those things that's what got me into that, and now it's
Hmm.
become a lucrative collection with all the money that I've spent on things.
Nice. Yeah, and I mean it has. This has led me to I got in. I became much more of a leftist through firearms.
Right. Can
It's-
you elaborate on that so
Yeah.
maybe
So
if somebody's
so
listening, maybe that'll
yeah.
change
So
their mind?
so yeah. So I listened to um Margaret Killjoy's "Live Like the World Is Dying."
Okay.
So I did a lot of support for the Black Lives Matter protests and things like that, and so I was already heading leftward, but I was DSA kind of person and things like that. Um, More sort of the, I guess, political leftist
Yeah.
as opposed to like activist leftist. Um, And then I was listening to Margaret Killjoy, and she had the folks from Yellow Peril Tactical on. They do the Tiger Block podcast, which is they're based on the West Coast, and it's firearms training and things like that for people of Asian descent.
Okay. So kind of
So
like the John Brown gun club.
yeah, yeah. And so I got that was one of the inspirations in J6, and I was like, okay, I can see where this is going. Um, so that's how I got my license, and then I was like looking to try to find people to learn from.
Yeah.
And because most of the training around here is right wingers.
Yeah.
Um,
I get
and
you on that one.
Yeah, and so I linked up with Pink Pistols, and that was kind of the beginning, and then I found my way to LGC, and then Socialist Rifle Association, and so through the SRA, I have definitely been exposed to a lot more leftist thought, and think about abolition, prison abolition, and the carceral state, and things like universal basic income, and I've done a fair bit of reading and about the history of the United States, and the fact that we are still a slave country essentially, and a
Yeah.
colonial experiment, and we're still colonizing and doing an imperialism. Um, and so just from kind of being exposed to those things, I have definitely moved farther and farther left.
And people thought I was super leftist. I just believe we need all, universal health care and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, I'm
And
the
you go
universal
even
healthcare.
further than that.
Yeah, I am somewhere on the anarcho-socialist
Yeah.
spectrum, where it's the worker should own the means of production, and like the town should own the power poles, and the people who work on the power lines should own those power lines, and you know to that level.
Yeah, and like I said, I kind of like the guy that I listen to, and I've had him on the show a couple times. We weren't talking guns, but the Yankee Marshal. I'm a little bit more left of center. I used to
Mhm.
be fully down the center,
Yeah.
where it didn't matter political parties as long as I agreed with your ideas. Then I would vote for you or I would do this.
Hmm.
But then, kind of like with what you were saying, once the whole Tea Party and then the Trump movement started kind of moving in, that pushed me way more to the left.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so much that I would vote right on like the national scale. It was more
Hmm.
when I was in, local
Yeah.
elections. But now it's pretty well straight down the left side of things. So,
That's good.
but
You need to come join us on the socialist side.
well, we'll see about that one. um, so anyway, back to a little bit more, and we'll finish up here pretty soon because
Yeah.
I told you we'd be only about an hour, but we had a
Hmm.
little bit of technical
Yeah,
difficulties.
and
So
I also I have an interview for someone joining the SRA chapter.
okay,
So,
all right. So yeah, we'll finish up pretty soon. But um, you say you went through the training. You're collecting a lot of guns. What would you say is your prized possession right now?
so I have a DMR capable AR-15 with
Oh,
the right
really?
with the right ammo. I can do one MOA at 100 yards.
Oh, wow. That's you know, if for people who don't know, that's pretty damn good shitting. That's like
That's a 1 inch. That's 5 bullets in a 1 inch box.
yeah, yeah. Um, oh, I was trying to think of the movie that it was shooting the eye out of the turkey or something like that,
Hmm.
but I can't think of what it was. But um, no, see, I've been more handgun collecting more than I have rifle collecting lately. So
Yeah.
the newest one that I bought that's kind of near and dear to me is my Colt Viper in
Okay.
357.
Yeah.
Uh, I've always been a fan of Colt because that was what Dad always loved, so that's what kind of
Hmm.
got me into it. But I am also a Sig fan that I love. I have my SP 2022 still. I have a Sig P226 that I converted
Nice.
from 40 to 357 Sig.
Oh, you're a
Um,
357 SIG fan? Oh, I'm sorry.
my thing is I want guns of different calibers.
Okay.
And the thing about the 226 is all it takes is a different barrel and it can go back and forth.
Hmm.
So I had a 10 millimeter Sig, but I traded that off, or I sold that, and that's how I got my lever action Marlin 4570.
Ooh, nice.
Um, but uh, I've always wanted just I don't like collecting one of the same caliber.
Okay.
I want a variety of things. So
Yeah,
even though I'm a big 40 cal fan, I wanted to have just because I my thing is if the shit actually does hit the fan,
you want
diversity.
yes. Yeah, but at the same time, it's the you collect the most common calibers.
And I have some. I
Yeah, that's why I'm 9 millimeter 5.56 308.
yeah.
Um,
I've got or dad's got they're basically half and half anymore. We kind of combine our stuff. Um we've got a couple of 308 rifles in there. I have a semi-auto 30-06
nice.
and stuff like that. So,
Wait,
you know,
do you have
we
an M1?
no, I do not have an
Okay,
M1. It's a Remington uh is it the 700?
okay. It's that platform.
Yeah, that platform where it's basically like a bar but
Yeah,
not as cool as a bar.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I have limited storage space. Um,
Right.
so
I get you on that one. It's a good thing I don't have kids running around because I'll have like a gun sitting over here and a gun sitting over
yeah,
there just
yeah.
because
My
I
my
run out of
wife
places.
Yeah, my wife won't let me keep the guns in the house, so I have an alternate storage solution.
Yeah, I feel you on that one.
So my wife is one of those people. It's take the guns away from everybody, including the cops.
Yeah, I see. I can never get into that. Well, I mean, I'd take everything away from the cops. I'm not saying that
Yeah,
end of it, but
yeah.
I couldn't take guns away from everybody because that's the one thing that has made the United States the thing it is because not only is
Imperialistic
distance
power.
kind of, but uh other than distance from places, it's the one thing that stopped people from trying to take over the United States is because they know there's so many people here that when you have more guns than
Nah,
people,
I don't think so. Honestly, yes, we
nobody
have
wants
more.
to get in the guerrilla battles. And I think that's the big thing about it.
I think it's more that we're far away and it would be generally expensive.
It would be, but I think when you look at things like Iraq and Afghanistan and that where the United States and even Russia when they did it back in the 80s, uh they had to fight so many guerrilla battles
Yes.
that it wasn't worth it. And I think you would have the same situation here, is you would have to fight so many guerrilla battles and stuff like that, that it wouldn't be worth it.
So that actually gets into something that with the proliferation of firearms and things like that,
Yeah.
uh, that that I feel that there's the whole 2A resisting tyranny, that kind of thing. And I mean what we've seen with all of the oil wars and resource wars is that if a state level actor wants you dead, you're dead.
Pretty much.
The all the AR-15s in the world are not going to do shit against armor.
No, it's
Um,
not.
but what they will do is make people pause, like random um, non-state actors, you know, who wish to do you harm.
Yeah.
Um, it will make them pause
Right.
and go try to find a less difficult target. And
And
that's the reason why I have picked up firearms.
right, and that's kind of the point that I was getting at was it's not so much that they would find it difficult to take over the United States, but when you think of cost and you think of the pests you would have to put down,
Yeah,
it doesn't make logical sense
yeah,
for them to do it. So, all right, well, I am going to wrap this up because
okay,
you got to get to your other
yeah,
interview here pretty soon. But if somebody is wanting to, more left leaning that wants to get into this, that's
hmm
listening, what would you tell them to do?
so. either hook up with LGC or SRA. SRA is definitely more leftist than LGC, but we're friends with LGC. I mean, we
Right.
internally I'm dual carded internal. SRA is like, oh, those liberals. Um, but we are happy to um, work with LGC folks, and I actually got my instructor certification through LGC. So LG, even though liberal is in the name of the club, liberal in this case, liberal is not a bad word.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, Dana, for joining me so much. Again,
Sure.
like she said, the Liberal Gun Club is a good place to start. At least you would have people to talk to with a common uh, a common thread more than going to a MAGA filled
Yes.
store
Yes.
or whatever.
Yeah.
So again, thank you for joining us. uh, Go over to the Liberal Gun Club, sign up, talk to some people. There is a Discord that you can talk to. There is an online forum. You can communicate with them, but that's a great resource for anybody who is interested. Or if you want, reach out to me. I mean, I may not know everything, but I can at least lead you to places and people to talk to and go from there. But find us wherever you find us on your podcasting platforms, social medias, Ohana Packers Edition podcast.
Can I
Uh,
can I pitch? Can I pitch some podcasts?
Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So Cool Zone Media, which is where Margaret Killjoy hangs out,
Okay.
um, and also the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts. So Margaret has her Cool People Who Does Cool Stuff, which is like radical leftist history, and then Live Like the World Is Dying is her sort of prepping podcast.
Well, there you go. There's another resource right there to get you into it if you're interested in it. So thank you for those. I'm going to end this by saying what we usually do for our normal ending. Or before I do that, we are going to get back into Packers stuff here pretty soon. I know there's been a lot of things going down. I've just been giving Mike a break because of the kids and all that stuff. So look for that. And if you want us to do any other kind of interview or anything, let me know. Reach out, do whatever. But go pack, go, and aloha.